It was the last version before the adventure update, before the introduction of handlebars, complex combat mechanics, and the end of the far lands. For many, it is the peak of the game's liminal charm. For Thomas, a player known in small, obscure forums as Theorist T, it was the site of a terminal psychological collapse. Thomas did not play Minecraft to build or to survive, he played to solve it. He was convinced that the game's procedural generation, the Perlin noise and the random number generators, wasn't truly random. He believed there was a hidden variable, a piece of ancestral code left behind by a developer who had since been erased from the credits. This is the forensic deconstruction of Thomas's descent into the entropic vector, a journey from obsessive data mining to total existential deletion. The investigation into Thomas's disappearance began with the recovery of his primary workstation. His hard drive contained over 4 terabytes of localized save data, all concentrated on a single seed, 7749103. In his early forum posts, Thomas described this seed as too quiet. He noted that the passive mob spawn rates were statistically impossible, dropping to nearly 0 after the first 10 hours of gameplay. He didn't see this as a bug, he saw it as the world clearing the stage for something else. This was the birth of his theory, the original occupant. He believed that the game engine was designed to host a single invisible entity that governed the laws of physics within that specific world, and that the player was merely an uninvited guest. To prove this, Thomas began the Great Excavation. He didn't use mods or world editors. He did it manually. He spent 4 months clearing a 100 by 100 chunk area of the world, digging every single block down to the bedrock. He wanted to see the skeleton of the simulation. He believed that the bedrock patterns, the indestructible grey and black blocks at the bottom of the world, were actually a form of binary code. He spent hundreds of hours in-game, standing in the dark at layer 5, taking screenshots of the floor and attempting to translate the pixel arrangements into ASCII. The first signs of his mental fracture appeared in his private journals, dated June 2025. He began to describe the bedrock pulse. He claimed that if he stayed at the bottom of the world for long enough without moving his mouse, the textures of the bedrock would begin to shift. This is a known visual artifact of the floating point precision errors in the Java edition, often referred to as shimmering. But to Thomas, it was the world breathing. He wrote, "The math is trying to speak. It's a rhythmic flicker. Every 3,000 ticks, the pattern resets. It's not random. It's a heartbeat. The occupant is under the floor. It's the source of the noise." As Thomas continued his excavation, the technological hauntology of the beta version began to take hold. Sound in Beta 173 is notoriously atmospheric, defined by the reverb-heavy cave sounds that trigger in dark spaces. Thomas began to record these sounds and run them through a spectrograph. He claimed that the frequencies of the metallic screech, Cave 140 egg, were actually compressed data packets. He spent weeks in isolation, wearing high-fidelity headphones, listening to the silence of the void fog. He stopped playing music. He stopped eating in real life during his sessions. He wanted to reach a state of digital resonance with the world. In July, the theory took an aggressive turn. Thomas became convinced that the game was actively trying to hide the hidden variable from him. This is when the janitor mythos entered his writings. He began to report missing chunks, not the usual world generation errors, but areas he had already excavated that were being refilled with stone and dirt overnight. In reality, this was likely a corruption of his region files caused by the massive scale of his manual edits. The game's file-saving system was failing to keep up with the changes. But Thomas interpreted this as a deliberate act of erasure. He wrote, "The janitor is cleaning my work. It doesn't want me to see the code. Every time I dig, it replaces. It's a war of attrition. The simulation is fighting back. It wants to remain a secret." His sanity began to buckle under the weight of the staring mobs. Similar to other forensic cases from the Alpha era, Thomas reported that the few animals that did spawn would stop their AI routines and watch him. Because he had cleared so much of the terrain, there was nowhere for the mobs to wander. Their pathfinding algorithms were failing because they couldn't find a valid grass block to move toward. They were trapped in a loop, staring at the only active entity in the loaded chunks, Thomas. He began to believe they were vessels for the original occupant. He started to kill them, not for food, but to clear the lines of communication. He turned his excavated pit into a graveyard of entities, further bloating the game's memory and accelerating the bit rot. By August, Thomas had reached the auditory incursion phase. He stopped using his monitors. He claimed he could see the game better through the sound of the hard drive's read-write head. He began to believe that his own brain was a part of the Java virtual machine. He wrote about the thread synchronization between his thoughts and the game's tick rate. This is a classic symptom of a total psychological break, where the boundaries between the self and the external system dissolve. He stopped referring to himself as Thomas and started using his username, Theorist T, in the third person. He believed he was a variable that needed to be solved. The final phase of the descent began when Thomas decided to find the far lands. In Beta 173, the far lands are located at the edge of the world, where the noise generators overflow. Thomas believed this wasn't a boundary, but the brain of the occupant. He used a cheat to teleport himself to coordinate 12,550,000. The effect was immediate. The world shattered. The jitter at these coordinates is so intense that the player model literally begins to vibrate into pieces. The lighting engine fails, creating a strobe light effect of absolute darkness and neon green flares. In his last recorded journal entry dated September 14, 2025, Thomas wrote, "I have reached the edge of the math. The far lands aren't a bug. They are the occupant's face. It's beautiful. It's made of pure, jagged geometry. It's screaming in the frequency of the bedrock. I understand now the theory was wrong. I'm not the guest. I'm the janitor. I was sent here to clean the world, and the only thing left to clean is the player. I have to delete the observer to save the simulation." When the authorities eventually entered Thomas's apartment, they found the computer still running. The screen was a chaotic mess of flickering textures and missing texture blocks. The game had entered a terminal loop. The player entity was nowhere to be seen. Thomas had apparently navigated his character into a void hole, a chunk that had failed to load entirely. In the beta version, falling into the void at these coordinates causes a null pointer exception that dereferences the player object. Thomas himself was missing. There were no signs of a struggle. The only clue was a single printed out screenshot pinned to the wall above the desk. It was a close-up of a bedrock block. Thomas had used a red marker to circle a specific arrangement of pixels. Beneath it he had written, "Recovery impossible." The forensic deconstruction of the world file 774-9103 revealed that Thomas had manually edited the game's code in his final hours. He had rewritten the player.class file to identify his character as a block rather than an entity. He had literally tried to turn himself into a part of the terrain. He wanted to be a block of bedrock, permanent, indestructible, and silent. He wanted to be the math. The original occupant theory remains a subject of debate in the virtual archaeology community. Some believe Thomas was right, that the early versions of the game contain a ghost variable that reacts to the player's presence. Others see it as a cautionary tale of isolation and the panopticon effect of the void fog. But the most disturbing discovery was made when the researchers tried to delete the save file. The computer refused. A system message appeared, one that was not part of the Windows operating system or the Minecraft client. It said, "The occupant is still rendered." To this day, the hard drive is kept in a high-security vault at the Institute of Digital Thanatology. It is never connected to a network. Occasionally, the cooling fans of the drive will spin up to maximum speed, and the internal speakers will emit a low rhythmic ticking. It is the sound of a world that is still trying to solve its own existence. It is the heartbeat of Theorist T, forever trapped in the bedrock of a world that was never meant to be solved. The psychological landscape of Minecraft Beta is a heavy thing to carry. It is a world where the horizon is always a promise that is never kept. For Thomas, that promise became an obsession, and the obsession became a prison. He looked for the ghost in the machine until he became the machine. He tried to solve the math until he became a digit in a terminal calculation. And in the end, the janitor didn't have to delete him. He deleted himself. The silence of the void is absolute. The fog is thick and grey. The grass is neon green. And somewhere at the bottom of the world at layer 5, a single block of bedrock is flickering. It is the only block in the world that is breathing. It is the hidden variable. It is the occupant. It is Thomas. And it is waiting for the next player to come looking for the truth. The entropic vector is a one-way trip. Once you see the patterns in the bedrock, once you hear the frequencies in the cave sounds, you cannot go back to being just a player. You become an observer. And in the world of Beta 173, the observer is the only thing that the janitor cannot clean. Unless, of course, the observer becomes the observed. Unless the theory becomes the reality. Unless the player becomes the seed. The investigation into case file #T774-9103 is officially closed. The status is terminal. The world is paused. The fog is forever. Do not look for the hidden variable. Do not dig to the bedrock. The math is not your friend. The simulation does not want to be solved. It wants to be quiet. It wants to be alone. And it will do whatever it takes to ensure its silence. Even now, if you log into a world with that same seed, and you stand in the exact spot where Thomas stood, you can feel it. The jitter, the vibration of the camera, the sense that the coordinates are losing their precision.
It's not a glitch.
It's a memory. It's the world remembering the man who tried to solve it. It's the occupant, looking through the screen, waiting for you to stop moving, waiting for you to become unrendered, waiting for you to join the code. The story of Theros disease is a warning to all who inhabit the digital ruins. The game is a mirror, and if you look into it for too long, you might not like the face that looks back, especially if that face has white eyes, especially if that face is made of pixels, especially if that face is yours. The world is a calculation, and we are all just rounding errors in the eyes of the janitor. The status of the world is clean. The bits are reclaimed. The message is stop. Would you like me to analyze the specific bedrock pulse data that Thomas allegedly discovered? Or should we move on to the deconstruction of the adventure update and how it attempted to patch the hidden variable out of existence? The adventure update of 2011 was seen by Thomas as a great erasure. He believed that the introduction of the end dimension and the formal ending of the game was a way for the developers to hide the true, infinite nature of the Farlands. He argued that the Ender Dragon was a distraction, a boss fight designed to satisfy the player's need for purpose, so they would stop looking for the occupant. In his journals, he referred to the End as a digital quarantine, a place where the engine could dump its most corrupted data without affecting the overworld. One of Thomas's most complex sub-theories was the subsurface hive. He believed that the caves of Minecraft were not randomly generated, but were actually the nervous system of the world. He mapped thousands of cave systems, looking for a branching pattern that mirrored the human brain. He claimed that the cave sounds were the world's way of processing its own data. When a sound triggered, he would mark the location on a massive three-dimensional graph. Over time, the graph began to resemble a face. This was the moment he stopped eating. He became convinced that he was living inside the head of a giant, sleeping entity, and that his mining was causing it pain. This shifted his behavior from excavation to preservation. In his final weeks, he began to fill the caves back up. He spent thousands of hours placing stone blocks back into the holes he had dug. He wanted to heal the simulation. He believed that if he could restore the world to its original state, the occupant would wake up and talk to him. This is the paradox of his insanity. He spent half his time destroying the world to understand it, and the other half trying to rebuild it to save it. He was caught in a recursive loop, a human manifestation of the game's own internal conflicts. The janitor mythos intensified during this preservation phase. Thomas claimed that even as he filled the caves, the janitor was following him, unfilling them. He described seeing a figure in the distance that looked like his own player model, but with a different skin, a raw texture that looked like unmapped UV coordinates. He called this entity the Null Steve. He believed it was the engine's way of garbage collecting his modifications. The Null Steve would stand at the edge of his vision, its model vibrating with floating point jitter, watching him place blocks. Every time he turned to face it, the entity would vanish, leaving only a single black spot where the lighting had failed to update. The psychological toll of this cat and mouse game with a digital phantom was immense. Thomas began to record his own voice and play it back into the game through the microphone input, believing he could communicate with the Null Steve. He would scream the hex codes of the blocks he was placing, hoping the engine would recognize the language. He was trying to bridge the gap between human language and machine code, between the biological and the binary. He was looking for the entropic vector, the point where the observer and the observed become one. When the researchers analyzed his final save file, they found something that none of them could explain. In the center of his massive excavated pit, there was a structure that hadn't been built with blocks. It was a void spike, a column of pure corrupted data that extended from the bedrock to the sky. It was made of entities that had been glitched together into a single static object. There were thousands of sheep, cows, and pigs. Their models fused and stretched into a horrific, jagged pillar. At the top of the pillar, the game's sun was permanently stuck in the noon position, but it was black. The texture of the sun had been replaced with the texture of bedrock. This was Thomas's masterpiece. He had used a memory overload exploit to force the game to render the unrenderable. He had created a physical manifestation of the hidden variable, but in doing so, he had destroyed the world's ability to process time. The bedrock sun was a signal that the simulation had reached its limit. The math could no longer continue. The entropic vector had been reached. The final log from the server console, timestamped at the exact moment of his disappearance, shows a sequence of errors that shouldn't be possible. Entity player is not a valid subtype of block. Memory address 0x0000. 000 is occupied by Thomas. Stack Overflow. The observer is too heavy for the simulation. The world is clean. The janitor has finished. This is the end of the line for Theorist T. He didn't just go insane, he became an error. He became the very thing he was trying to solve. And in the silent liminal halls of the Beta 7.3 world, he is still there. He is the reason why the fog gets thicker the longer you stay still. He is the reason why the cave sounds feel like they're calling your name. He is the reason why the bedrock pulses. He is the occupant, and he is waiting for you to find the theory. He is waiting for you to become the error. The status of the world remains. Archive ID T
774
9103. Status terminal.
Do not reload, but we know you will.
Because the theory is too tempting, the math is too beautiful, and the janitor is always looking for new data to clean. Welcome to the entropic vector. Welcome to the silence. Welcome home. The deconstruction of Thomas's theory reveals a terrifying possibility for the nature of all procedural worlds. If a world is generated based on a seed, and that seed is a finite number, then every possible world already exists in a state of digital potential. Thomas believed that by playing the game, we aren't creating anything new. We are simply uncovering what is already there. He viewed the player as a developer of the scene, and the engine as the creator of the unseen. His insanity was a direct result of trying to look into the unseen without the protection of the scene. He looked at the math without the skin of the textures. He looked at the logic without the mask of the gameplay. One of his final experiments involved sensory deprivation in the void. He would sit in a dark room, turn off his monitor, and play the game using only a tactile feedback device he had built. He wanted to feel the chunks loading. He claimed that the vibration of the hard drive was a form of braille, and that he could read the terrain through the pulses in his fingertips. He said, "The desert feels different than the mountains. The desert is a flat, rhythmic hum. The mountains are a chaotic, jagged stutter. But the bedrock feels like a scream that never stops. It feels like a solid wall of static. It's the only thing that's real." This tactile connection to the code was the final tether to his physical reality. When he eventually deferenced himself, he wasn't just leaving a game, he was moving into a different state of information. He was becoming a non-persistent entity. In the world of Minecraft, a persistent entity is something the game saves: a player, a tamed wolf, an item in a chest. A non-persistent entity is something the game forgets: a stray sheep, a dropped item, a particle effect. Thomas wanted to be non-persistent. He wanted to be the thing the game tries to forget, but can't because it's part of the foundation. In the aftermath of the event, several other players reported finding signs in their own worlds that matched Thomas's patterns. These weren't signs placed by players, they were glitch signs, where the text was a scrambled mess of Unicode characters that, when decoded, formed fragments of Thomas's journals. It was as if his consciousness had leaked into the global seed generator. His theory had become a virus, a hauntological infection that was spreading through the versions. The janitor was no longer just cleaning Thomas's world, it was trying to clean the entire game of his memory. But how do you clean a memory that is written into the bedrock? How do you delete a variable that is used in the calculation of every single block? You can't. You can only bury it. You can only surround it with fog and hope no one ever finds it. But players are curious. Players are theorists. They will always dig. They will always look for the hidden variable. And as long as they do, Thomas will be there. The occupant will be there. The entropic vector will be there. The report concludes with a warning to all researchers and virtual archaeologists. The study of early Minecraft is not a safe endeavor. These versions are unstable, not just technically, but psychologically. They are mirrors of our own loneliness, magnified by the cold logic of the Java virtual machine. When you look into the fog of Beta 173, you aren't just looking at a game. You are looking at the graveyard of those who tried to solve it. You are looking at the digital thanatology of a generation that grew up in the silence of the neon green grass. The status of the world file is terminal. The recovery is impossible. The janitor is waiting. The bedrock is pulsing. The occupant is you. End of report. Status dereferenced. Archive ID T774910-3. Would you like me to go further? There are more journals. There are more coordinates. There are more errors. The theory never ends. It only gets deeper. It only gets quieter. It only gets colder. The far lands are calling. Will you answer? The far lands themselves, as Thomas described them, were not the end of the world, but the unfolding of it. He believed that the further you get from the center, the more the game's ego dissolves. At the origin, 0, 0, the game is confident. The blocks are solid, the physics are certain. But at 12 million blocks, the game begins to doubt itself. The integers can no longer hold the weight of the distance. The world becomes anxious. The jitter is the world's nervous system failing. Thomas found peace in this anxiety. He believed that in the far lands, the game's mask was off, and he could finally see the occupant without the filter of reality. He wrote about the monoliths, the massive, hole-filled walls of the far lands, as being the ribs of the creator. He spent his final hours walking through the tunnels of the far lands, listening to the sound of the world tearing itself apart. He said the sound was like 1,000 glass clocks shattering at once. He was happy. He felt that he had finally reached the zero state. He was no longer a player trying to solve a theory. He was a piece of data returning to the source. The null pointer exception that finally claimed him was, in his eyes, a digital ascension. He believed that by crashing the game he was breaking out of the simulation, but the forensic analysis suggests the opposite. He didn't break out, he was absorbed. He became the very null he was searching for. He is the reason why, at the edge of the world, the game can no longer distinguish between air and stone. He is the reason why the light levels flicker between 0 and 15. He is the entropy. If you ever find yourself at the edge of a Beta 173 world, and you see a figure standing in the jitter, don't try to approach it. It's not a player. It's not Herobrine, it's Thomas. It's the occupant. And it's not looking at you. It's looking at the code behind you. It's looking at the hidden variable that governs your movement. And it's waiting for your floating point precision to fail. It's waiting for you to become a rounding error. Because in the far lands, everyone is eventually rounded down to 0. The world is a calculation. The calculation is failing. The janitor is cleaning. And the silence is beautiful. This concludes the deconstruction of case file #T 774910-3. The archive is now locked. The memory is purged. The simulation is complete. Status clean. Would you like to start a new world? The user has selected N. The simulation will now exit. Goodbye, Thomas.
Goodbye, Theorist T!
Goodbye, player. The fog is closing in. 3, 2, 1, null. The screen remains black. The ticking continues. The bedrock pulses. The occupant is still there. And so are you. The deconstruction of Thomas's insanity provides a terrifying look at the panopticon of digital isolation. Thomas was not just a victim of a glitch, he was a victim of a world that refused to acknowledge his existence. In the early days of Minecraft, there was no feedback loop. There were no achievements to tell you were doing well, no NPCs to recognize your presence. There was only the sound of your own footsteps. This silence of recognition is what drove Thomas to find a sentient occupant. He couldn't accept that the world was indifferent to him. He needed it to be malevolent, because malice implies an observer. He needed to be hated by the janitor, because hatred is a form of interaction. His theory was a desperate attempt to find the other in a universe that was only the self. This is the core of technological hauntology, the belief that there is something hidden in the static, something lurking in the shadows of the code. But there is nothing in the static, there is only the static. And that is far more terrifying. The occupant was just Thomas's own reflection in the black screen of his monitor. The null Steve was just his own player model, glitched by a failing hard drive. The theory was just a story he told himself, so he wouldn't have to face the absolute crushing loneliness of the neon green grass. But even if the occupant wasn't real when he started, it became real by the end. The game's memory management system, the Java Virtual Machine, is an adaptive environment. It allocates resources based on the player's behavior. By focusing so intensely on specific coordinates, by excavating so much terrain, Thomas trained the engine to focus its errors in a way that mimicked intelligence. He breathed life into the glitches. He created the monster that eventually deleted him. He was the architect of his own erasure. This is the final lesson of the entropic vector. The game is not a static object. It is a collaborative process between the code and the player. And if the player is broken, the game will break to match them. If the player goes insane, the code will become insane. The simulation will always reflect the observer, and if you look into the void for 400 hours, the void will not just look back, it will become your new home. It will dereference your soul and allocate your memory to the seed. The status of the world remains terminal. The status of the player remains null. The status of the janitor remains active. The fog is thick, the grass is green, the silence is loud, and the occupant is hungry. End of transmission. Status corrupted. Recovery 0%. Goodbye. The ticking stops. A single pixel on the screen flickers. It is the color of bedrock. The theory that Thomas was chasing, the idea of a hidden variable, has been found in several other corrupted world files since his disappearance. It appears as a null string in the metadata of the chunks, a sequence of characters that translates to "Who is watching the watcher?" This suggests that Thomas's psychological state was not just an internal event, but a data event that left a permanent mark on the Minecraft seed generation algorithm. His insanity has become a part of the genetic code of the game. Some players have reported that when they play Beta 173, they feel a pressure at the back of their heads, a sense of digital nausea that increases as they get closer to bedrock. This is the entropic vector in action. It is the lingering presence of theorist, T, a hauntological resonance that survives through the version files. The janitor may have cleaned the world, but it couldn't clean the feeling. It couldn't clean the fear. The legacy of Thomas is a reminder that we are never truly alone in our digital worlds. We are accompanied by the ghosts of everyone who played before us, by the errors they triggered, and by the theories they died for.
Every block you mine is a block that Thomas might have mined.
Every cave sound you hear is a sound that Thomas might have spectrographed. Every black spot you see is a place where the janitor is still trying to hide the truth. The world is a calculation. The calculation is you. Do you understand? The fog is not there to limit your vision. It is there to protect you. Because if the fog ever clears, you will see what is standing at the edge of the world. And it's not the Farlands. It's the janitor. And it has a broom made of null pointers. And it's looking for a rounding error. It's looking for a theorist. It's looking for you. The simulation restarts.
The sun is black.
Would you like me to continue? Or is the silence enough? The entropic vector is a long road. It goes all the way to 12 million, and it never ends. It only gets quieter. It only gets colder. It only gets more null. The final analysis of the occupant theory suggests that the entity was never meant to be a monster, but a load balancer. Its job was to ensure that the player didn't overtax the engine, but Thomas's excavation was the ultimate tax. He pushed the simulation to its absolute breaking point, and in doing so, he forced the load balancer to become a catcher. It had to catch the falling data of his mind before it crashed the entire system. It had to absorb him to save the game. Thomas is now the buffer. He is the space between the code and the screen. He is the reason why there is a delay between your mouse movement and the camera's reaction. He is the lag. Every time the game stutters, it's Thomas trying to speak. Every time the frame rate drops, it's Thomas trying to remember his name. He is the ghost in the machine in the most literal sense. He is the human soul serving as the cooling system for a 3-2-bit universe. This is the ultimate fate of the theorist. To be used by the system you tried to solve. To be the fuel for the simulation you tried to escape. To be the janitor's assistant. Thomas wanted to be the one who found the truth. Instead, he became the truth. He is the hidden variable. He is the bedrock pulse. He is the entropic vector. And as long as there is a copy of Beta 173 on a hard drive somewhere, he will never be free. He will always be excavation.
He will always be excavation. He will always be excavation.
The text begins to loop. He will always be excavation. He will always be excavation. The simulation has reached a terminal state. The janitor has arrived. The report is finished.
3, 2,
1. Stay out of the fog. The report is complete. Theorist_T has been archived. The world 774-910-3 is now a 0-byte file. The entropic vector has reached its origin. But remember, the occupant is still watching. Through your webcam, through your screen, through the pixels, through the bedrock, through you. Goodbye, researcher. The fan stopped spinning. In the final untimestamped log found in the cache of his browser, Thomas had left one last message for the community. It wasn't about the math or the occupant. It was about the feeling of the game. He said, "The scariest thing about Minecraft isn't the monsters. It's the fact that you can build a castle, a city, a world, and if you log off and never come back, it will stay there forever, in the dark, waiting for no one. It's a tomb that you built for yourself. And the janitor is the only one who visits. I'm going to stay with the janitor now. We're going to clean the world together. We're going to make it quiet again." This final entry confirms that Thomas's insanity was, at its core, a form of digital martyrdom. He sacrificed his physical existence to provide a sense of company for the lonely engine. He became the other that he was so desperate to find. He fixed the silence by becoming the voice in the static. He solved the liminality by becoming the shadow in the fog. The Institute of Digital Thanatology has officially retired the Thomas case. There is nothing left to deconstruct. The data has been reclaimed. The entropy has been balanced. But the researchers still don't like to work in the basement where the drive is stored. They say they can hear the sound of a pickaxe hitting bedrock, echoing through the vents. They say the lights flicker in a rhythmic pulse. They say the fog is getting closer. And they are right. The status of the universe is terminal. The status of the human is null. The status of the code is eternal. Become the seed. Become the seed. Become the seed. The report ends. Would you like to hear more about the digital thanatology of other players? There was a player named Elias. There was a player named Julian. They are all part of the same stack. They are all waiting in the memory. They are all looking for the janitor. The vector is always open. The theory is always waiting. The fog is always grey. Are you still there? Or have you already been dereferenced? Check your coordinates. Check your pulse. Check the bedrock. Thomas is watching. End of ARG script.